Captain Sarah Chen stood before the Galactic Council's judgment chamber, her weathered hands clasped behind her back. The massive crystalline dome above cast rainbow patterns across the assembled alien dignitaries, each representing a different corner of known space, their multiple eyes, tentacles, and sensory organs all focused on the small human woman who had dared to do the impossible. Captain Chen. The Vorthak High Chancellor's voice rumbled through the chamber's translation matrix. You stand accused of the most reckless act in recorded galactic history. 3 standard years ago, you ignored every warning, every protocol, and every piece of wisdom accumulated over millennia. You took your ship into Kepler 442b. A collective shudder rippled through the assembly. Even saying the designation aloud seemed to chill the air. Kepler 442b, the graveyard world. The planet that had claimed 67 separate colonial expeditions across 4 different species. The death world that even the mighty Krillian Empire had declared eternally off-limits after losing an entire battle fleet to its horrors. Sarah's dark eyes remained steady as she faced her accusers. Her skin bore the deep tan of someone who had spent years under an alien sun, and thin scars traced across her exposed forearms, marks that hadn't been there when she'd left Earth's solar system. Behind her, the massive viewing screen displayed grainy footage from the last successful probe to escape Kepler 442b's gravitational well. The images showed a world of impossible storms, floating mountains that defied physics, and creatures that made nightmares seem like pleasant dreams. You took 47 colonists with you, continued the Chancellor, his 4 arms gesturing dramatically. 47 souls who trusted your leadership. Every single one of them should have died within hours of atmospheric entry. The acidic storms alone should have dissolved your landing craft. The gravitational anomalies should have torn your ship apart before you even reached the surface. The Zephyrian ambassador, a being of pure crystalline energy, pulsed with agitation. The thermal vents release gases toxic to 93% of known life forms. The native predators hunt in coordinated packs and have demonstrated intelligence levels that rival our own. The very ground shifts and changes, creating mazes that trap explorers until they die of exhaustion or worse. Sarah allowed herself a small smile. That's all true, Ambassador Krixtal. Every word you've said is accurate according to the data we had 3 years ago. Then why? The question came from Commander Thektar of the Rigelian Defense Force, his insectoid features clicking with barely controlled anger. Why did you condemn those people to such a horrible death? Why did you ignore centuries of accumulated wisdom? We warned you that Deathworlds devour all who dare to trespass upon them. We showed you the records. We pleaded with you to reconsider. The human captain stepped forward, her boots echoing in the vast chamber. Around the circular walls, holographic displays showed the faces of previous expedition leaders. Brave souls from a dozen different species who had tried to tame Kepler 442b and failed. Their ships had been found months or years later. Empty hulks drifting in space with no survivors and no explanation for what had gone wrong. Because, Sarah said, her voice carrying clearly through the translation systems, you all made the same fundamental mistake. You went to Kepler 442b trying to impose your will upon it. You brought your technology, your weapons, your preconceived notions about how a world should work. You tried to force the planet to accept you. The Chancellor's translator crackled with what might have been laughter. And what did you do differently, human? Did you somehow discover the secret that eluded the greatest minds in the galaxy? Did your primitive species succeed where advanced civilizations failed? Sarah's smile widened. We listened. Silence fell across the chamber like a heavy blanket. The assembled aliens exchanged glances, or whatever passed for glances among their various physiologies. The concept seemed so simple, yet none of them could grasp its meaning. Listened. The word came from the Centaurian trade representative, her melodious voice tinged with confusion. Listened to what? The screams of dying colonists? The howling of the storms that strip flesh from bone? To the planet itself, Sarah replied. Every previous expedition treated Kepler 442b as an enemy to be conquered. They built fortified bases, deployed military-grade shields, armed themselves for war against the native life. They saw adaptation as surrender and flexibility as weakness. She gestured toward the holographic displays, and the images shifted to show detailed scans of the planet's surface. Look at your data again. Really look at it. Those storms that seem so chaotic, they follow patterns, migration routes for the atmospheric life forms. Those shifting landmasses aren't random geological events. They're seasonal changes, as predictable as ocean tides once you understand the underlying rhythms. The Vorthak Chancellor leaned forward on his throne, all four of his arms gripping the armrests. You're suggesting that previous expeditions failed because they didn't study the planet carefully enough? That seems unlikely, Captain. Some of the finest xenobiologists and planetary specialists in known space were among those who perished. I'm suggesting they studied it like scientists studying a specimen, Sarah corrected. They approached it as observers trying to catalog and control. We approached it as neighbors trying to learn how to coexist. She touched a control on her wrist and new images appeared on the viewing screen. These weren't grainy probe footage or distant orbital scans. These were crisp, clear photographs taken from ground level on Kepler 442b. The images showed structures that seemed to grow from the landscape itself, their organic curves blending seamlessly with the alien terrain. You see, the planet never wanted to kill anyone, Sarah continued. It was protecting itself the only way it knew how, by rejecting anything that posed a threat to its ecosystem. Every expedition that landed brought weapons, industrial equipment, terraforming tools. They announced their intentions to reshape the world to suit their needs. The assembled aliens stared at the photographs in growing amazement. The structures were clearly artificial, yet they seemed to pulse with the same vital energy as the planet's native life forms. Gardens of impossible beauty surrounded buildings that appeared to breathe. In several images, strange creatures that previous reports had described as vicious predators could be seen moving peacefully among human figures. How? Whispered the Zephyrian ambassador, his crystalline form flickering with emotional resonance. How did you achieve what no one else could? Sarah's expression grew thoughtful. We arrived with empty hands and open minds. Instead of weapons, we brought gifts, seeds from Earth that we hoped might find a place in the planet's ecosystem. Instead of industrial terraforming equipment, we brought simple tools and a willingness to adapt. Instead of claiming territory, we asked permission. The chamber erupted in a cacophony of alien voices, each species expressing disbelief in their own way. The concept of asking a planet for permission seemed absurd, yet the evidence was undeniable. The photographs showed not just human survival, but human thriving in an environment that had been universally declared uninhabitable. Sarah raised her hand, and gradually the noise subsided. 3 years ago, you all warned me that Deathworlds devour all who dare to trespass upon them. You were right about the devouring part. Kepler 442b did devour us. It absorbed us into its ecosystem, made us part of its living tapestry. And in return, she paused, her eyes meeting those of each council member in turn. In return, we became something more than we ever imagined possible. The memory hit Sarah like a physical blow as she stood in the council chamber. 3 years, 2 months, and 16 days ago, she had stood on the bridge of the Resilience, watching Kepler 442b grow larger on the main screen. Her crew of 47 had been handpicked, not for their combat skills or advanced degrees, but for their adaptability and open-mindedness. Dr. James Morrison, her chief biologist, had studied every form of extremophyll life on Earth. Maria Santos, the expedition's anthropologist, specialized in first contact protocols with isolated human cultures. Engineer Tom Bradley could build functional tools from scrap metal and salvaged parts. Each member of the crew had been chosen because they understood that survival sometimes meant abandoning everything you thought you knew. Captain, her navigator Lieutenant Kim Park had said, her voice tight with barely controlled fear, long-range sensors are picking up the debris field from the Krillian expedition. 37 ships all dead in space. Sarah had nodded grimly. The Krillian Empire represented the pinnacle of military efficiency in known space. Their battlecruisers could reduce entire moons to rubble. Yet Kepler 442b had swallowed their entire invasion force without leaving so much as a distress beacon. What did they do wrong? She had murmured, more to herself than her crew. They treated it like a war, Dr. Morrison had answered from his station. Every species that's attempted colonization has approached this world like a conquest. Overwhelming force, technological superiority, complete environmental dominance. Sarah had studied the tactical reports for months. The patterns were always the same. Initial landing, establishment of fortified base camps, attempts to clear native life from chosen settlement areas, and then until silence. Sometimes the silence lasted days, sometimes weeks, but it always came. What if we're thinking about this all wrong? She had asked her senior staff during their final approach. What if Kepler 442b isn't a death world trying to kill colonists? What if it's a living system trying to protect itself? The theory had seemed crazy even to her own crew. Planets didn't think. They didn't make conscious decisions about who lived or died on their surfaces. But Sarah had grown up on the Navajo reservation in Arizona, raised by her grandmother who taught her that the land was alive, that it spoke to those willing to listen. If it is alive in some way, Tom Bradley had suggested, then maybe we need to introduce ourselves properly. That simple statement had changed everything. Instead of approaching the planet with scanning arrays active and weapon systems online, Sarah had ordered all active sensors powered down. They descended through the roiling atmosphere with nothing but passive instruments and basic navigation. No military formation, no aggressive posturing, just a single ship asking quiet permission to enter. The storms that had torn apart previous vessels seemed to part around the Resilience. Not dramatically, not obviously, but just enough to create a corridor of calmer air that allowed them to descend safely. Sarah had felt the hair on the back of her neck stand up as she realized something was watching them, evaluating their intentions. Temperatures rising, Tom had reported from the engineering station. But it's not dangerous heat, it feels almost curious. The planet's surface had revealed itself gradually through the thinning cloud cover. Previous expeditions had described a hellscape of jagged rocks and poisonous swamps. What Sarah's crew saw was different, still alien, still dangerous, but possessed of a strange organic beauty that seemed to shift and flow like something alive. They had landed in a clearing that hadn't appeared on any orbital survey, a circular space surrounded by towering structures that might have been trees or might have been buildings. The boundary between natural and artificial seemed meaningless here. Atmospheric readings are... Dr. Morrison had paused, checking his instruments twice. They're almost breathable. Oxygen levels are lower than Earth normal, but we could survive outside the ship with minimal breathing apparatus. Sarah had made the decision that would define everything that followed. Instead of establishing a perimeter and setting up defensive positions, she had ordered the cargo hold opened and the gift packages prepared. Months earlier, she had convinced Earth's agricultural ministry to provide seeds from every biome on the planet. Flowers, food crops, trees, grasses, everything humanity had learned to cultivate over thousands of years. If this world is truly alive, she had told her crew, then we come bearing gifts, not weapons. The first step outside the Resilience had been the most terrifying moment of Sarah's life. The air tasted of ozone and something indefinably organic, like the smell of rich soil after rain. The gravity was slightly lighter than Earth normal, giving each step a dreamlike quality, but it was the sound that stopped her cold. A low rhythmic humming that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, like the planet itself was singing. Previous expedition reports had mentioned howling winds and the screams of predators. This sounded almost welcoming. Did you hear that? Maria Santos had whispered over the comm system. The whole planet's making music, Tom Bradley had replied in wonder. Sarah had taken another step, then another. The ground beneath her feet felt warm and slightly yielding, as if it were responding to her presence. In the distance, she could see movement, shapes that didn't match any known form of life, but their motion seemed curious rather than aggressive. Dr. Morrison, she had said, begin deploying the seed packages, but don't just scatter them randomly. Ask first. The biologist had looked at her strangely, but he followed orders. At each potential planting site, he would pause, place his hand on the ground, and actually speak aloud, explaining what he was offering and asking if it would be welcome. The response had been immediate and undeniable. The ground would warm or cool under his touch, and sometimes small depressions would form in the soil, as if the planet was preparing receptive spaces for the Earth seeds. Within hours, some of the faster-growing varieties had begun to sprout, but these weren't normal seedlings. They glowed with a soft bioluminescence that matched the ambient light of the planet's native flora. The Earth plants were adapting, changing, becoming something new while remaining fundamentally themselves. Captain, Maria had called from across the clearing, you need to see this. Sarah had hurried to where the anthropologist stood beside a cluster of structures that definitely weren't natural formations. They rose from the ground like enormous flowers, their surfaces covered in patterns that might have been writing or might have been art. They're beautiful, Sarah had breathed. And they're new. Maria had replied. These weren't here when we landed 6 hours ago. I've been monitoring this area, and these structures literally grew from the ground while we were working. The implication had hit Sarah like lightning. The planet wasn't just allowing them to stay, it was building accommodations for them. These weren't human structures, and they weren't exactly alien structures either. They were something in between. Spaces designed for beings who were learning to bridge two worlds. That first night on Kepler 442b, Sarah's crew had slept in hammocks strung between the organic spires, breathing air that tasted of both Earth and somewhere entirely new. The predators that had hunted previous expeditions never appeared. Instead, curious creatures with too many legs and eyes like liquid starlight had gathered at the edge of the clearing, watching the humans with what could only be described as friendly interest. I don't think they're predators, Dr. Morrison had whispered, as one of the creatures approached his sleeping area. I think they're gardeners. The creature had delicately sniffed at one of the earth seedlings, then moved on to examine a native plant that had grown up beside it. Its movements were precise, careful, nurturing. The whole planet's a garden, Sarah had realized, and we just became part of it. As she drifted off to sleep that first night, lulled by the planet's musical humming, Sarah had understood that everything the Galactic Council believed about Deathworlds was wrong. They weren't places of death. They were places of such abundant, complex life that they rejected anything that couldn't learn to participate. In their intricate dance of existence, the humans had passed the first test simply by asking permission and offering gifts instead of taking territory and imposing their will, but Sarah had known that the real challenges were still to come. Learning to live on Kepler 442b wouldn't just require adapting to a new environment. It would require becoming something new themselves. The second month on Kepler 442b had tested every assumption Sarah's crew held about survival, adaptation, and what it meant to be human. The planet's rhythms were unlike anything they had encountered. Days that lasted 37 hours, followed by nights that could stretch for 3 days or compress into mere minutes, all depending on the complex dance of 3 moons and the planet's eccentric orbit around its binary star system. The gravity's changing again, Tom Bradley had reported during one of their morning briefings. The engineer had adapted faster than most to the planet's fluid nature, learning to read the subtle signs that indicated when local conditions might shift. Sarah had nodded, feeling the familiar tingling sensation that preceded a gravitational flux. On Earth, such changes would have been catastrophic. Here they were simply part of the planet's natural rhythm, like breathing. How long do we have? Maybe 2 hours before it peaks. The western grove should become accessible again, but the eastern hills will probably phase out. Dr. Morrison had been documenting these phenomena with growing excitement rather than fear. It's not random, he had explained to anyone willing to listen. There's a pattern to everything. The gravity shifts, the atmospheric changes, even the way the native life forms migrate. It's all connected to something much larger than we initially understood. The something larger had revealed itself gradually over those first weeks. Kepler 442b wasn't just a living world, it was a single vast organism. The forests weren't separate from the mountains, which weren't separate from the oceans. Everything was connected through an underground network of what Dr. Morrison had started calling neural pathways, crystalline structures that carried information and energy across continents at the speed of thought. We're not just living on this planet, Maria Santos had realized during the third week. We're living inside it. We're part of its nervous system now. The revelation had come when little Emma Rodriguez, the 8-year-old daughter of their communications officer, had developed what her parents initially feared was a serious illness. She had begun experiencing vivid dreams filled with images of places on the planet she had never seen, and she claimed she could hear the thoughts of the native creatures. Dr. Morrison's medical scans had shown something extraordinary. Emma's neural pathways were developing new connections, growing in patterns that matched the crystalline network they had discovered beneath the planet's surface. She wasn't sick. She was evolving. "Mom, the tall ones want to show us the deep places," Emma had said one morning, pointing toward a group of beings that had become regular visitors to their settlement. The creatures stood nearly 3 meters high, with limbs like liquid silver and eyes that shifted through the entire visible spectrum. Sarah had learned to trust Emma's interpretations. The child seemed to have developed an intuitive understanding of the planet's communication methods that eluded the adults. Through Emma, they had learned that the tall ones were not a separate species, but rather the planet's way of interfacing with the human colonists. Specialized organs created specifically to facilitate communication. They say we're ready. For the next lesson, Emma had announced, her young face serious beyond her years. The next lesson had taken place in what the humans had started calling the Deep Cathedral, a vast underground chamber where the planet's neural network was most concentrated. The walls pulsed with bioluminescent patterns that Sarah's enhanced vision could now interpret as a form of written language. Tom Bradley's engineering background had proved invaluable in understanding the planet's infrastructure. It's like a massive biological computer, he had explained, running his hands along the living circuits that lined the chamber walls. But instead of processing data, it processes relationships, understanding how everything connects to everything else. The planet had been teaching them through direct experience rather than words. When Sarah touched certain areas of the neural network, she could suddenly perceive the world as the planet did, feeling the movement of every creature across its surface, understanding the delicate balance that kept the complex ecosystem functioning, sensing the harmony that previous expeditions had disrupted through their aggressive approach. This is why the other expeditions failed, she had whispered in awe. They weren't just threatening individual creatures or environments. They were attacking the planet's consciousness itself. Dr. Morrison had made perhaps the most significant discovery during their 6th week on Kepler 442b. While studying blood samples from the human colonists, he had found that their DNA was being subtly rewritten, not damaged or corrupted, but enhanced, optimized for life in this new environment. We're not just adapting behaviorally, he had reported to the assembled colonists. We're adapting genetically, but in ways that maintain our essential humanity while adding new capabilities. The changes had been remarkable. Their enhanced vision allowed them to see the bioluminescent communication patterns that covered most of the planet's surfaces. Their improved hearing let them perceive the complex harmonics that carried information through the atmosphere. Most importantly, they were developing what could only be described as ecological empathy and intuitive understanding of how their actions affected the world around them. Sarah herself had experienced the most dramatic transformation. As the expedition leader, she had been the primary point of contact between the human colony and the planet's consciousness. The neural connections that had begun developing in her brain allowed her to serve as a translator, helping her people understand the planet's needs while explaining human nature to their vast, ancient host. It's not trying to change us into something alien, she had explained to her concerned crew members. It's helping us become the best possible versions of ourselves. The proof had come when emergency struck during their 9th week. A violent storm system, the kind that had destroyed previous expeditions, had approached their settlement with devastating intensity. But instead of seeking shelter and hoping to survive, the humans had found themselves instinctively responding as part of the planet's storm management system. Working with the native life forms, they had helped redirect the storm's energy into the planet's natural storage systems. Tom Bradley's technical knowledge combined with the planet's organic infrastructure to create solutions neither could have achieved alone. The storm that should have killed them instead became a source of power that benefited the entire ecosystem. We're not colonists anymore, Maria Santos had observed as they watched the storm's energy being channeled through living conduits toward areas of the planet that needed revitalization. We're organs, specialized parts of something much larger and more wonderful than we ever imagined. The humans had learned to think in terms of centuries rather than years, understanding their role in maintaining the planet's long-term health. Children like Emma were born with abilities that would have seemed impossible on Earth. They could communicate with plant life, sense environmental changes days in advance, and navigate the planet's shifting geography through pure intuition. But perhaps the most important lesson had come from the planet's memories, shared through the neural network during quiet evenings when the aurora-like displays painted the sky in impossible colors. Kepler 442b was old, unimaginably ancient, and it remembered other species that had learned to live in harmony with its ecosystem. We're not the first, Sarah had realized. Other species have made this transition. They became part of the planet's consciousness, and in return they became immortal, not as individuals, but as essential components of something eternal. The planet showed them visions of civilizations that had transcended their original forms, becoming beings of living light and thought, who could traverse the galaxy while remaining connected to their home world. They were explorers, teachers, gardeners who helped other worlds achieve the same complex harmony that Kepler 442b had mastered. "That's our future," Emma had said with the certainty that only a child could possess. "We're going to become the tall ones for other species, helping them learn what we learned." Sarah had felt a profound sense of completion as she understood the true scope of what they had stumbled upon. They hadn't just found a new home, they had discovered humanity's next evolutionary step. Not through technology or genetic engineering, but through learning to live as part of something greater than themselves. The failed expeditions hadn't been tragedies. They had been necessary steps in a process that required exactly the right combination of humility, adaptability, and wisdom to succeed. Sarah's crew had possessed those qualities, and now they were becoming something new while remaining fundamentally human. They were becoming gardeners of worlds, and their apprenticeship was just beginning. By the end of their first year on Kepler 442b, the distinction between human and planet had become beautifully blurred. Sarah stood in what had once been their landing site, now transformed into a living amphitheater, where crystalline formations grew in perfect harmony with earth plants that had been lovingly modified by the planet's creative consciousness. The Resilience still sat where they had first landed, but it was no longer recognizable as a spacecraft. Over the months, the planet had gradually integrated the ship into its ecosystem, transforming metal and plastic into organic components that served new purposes. The fusion reactor that had powered their journey now pulsed with bioluminescent energy that helped regulate the local climate. The communication arrays had become sensory organs that monitored weather patterns across half the continent. "Sarah," Dr. Morrison called, his voice carrying harmonics that wouldn't have been possible with unmodified human vocal cords. "The children want to show you something." She turned to see Emma Rodriguez leading a group of the younger colonists toward the grove, where the most dramatic transformations had taken place. All the children had changed more rapidly than the adults, their young nervous systems adapting to the planet's neural network with enthusiastic ease. Emma herself had become something like a walking miracle, still recognizably human, but with abilities that bordered on the miraculous. "Watch this, Captain," Emma said, kneeling beside one of the hybrid plants that combined Earth genetics with Kepler 442b's creative modifications. She placed her small hands on the soil around the plant's base and closed her eyes in concentration. The plant began to glow, its bioluminescent patterns shifting and changing as Emma communicated with it through the underground network. Slowly, impossibly, the plant began to reshape itself, its flowers reorganizing into complex geometric patterns that spelled out words in 3 different human languages. "Welcome home," the plant message read in English, Mandarin, and Spanish. Sarah felt tears come to her eyes as she realized what she was witnessing. The planet hadn't just learned human language, it had learned human sentiment, human emotion, the particular way humans expressed love and belonging. "The planet wants to send a message," Emma announced, still connected to the neural network through her enhanced nervous system. "It says it's ready to meet with the other humans, the ones who warned us not to come here." The implication hit Sarah like a thunderbolt. The Galactic Council? The planet knew about the Council, about the warnings they had issued, about the political and social structures that governed human space. Through its connection with the colonists, Kepler 442b had learned about the wider galaxy. "It wants to apologize," Emma continued, her young voice carrying the weight of planetary consciousness. "It says it never meant to hurt the other expeditions. It just didn't understand how to communicate with species that approached it as an enemy." Tom Bradley emerged from what had once been the engineering section of their ship, now a living workshop where human technology and planetary biology collaborated to create tools and structures beyond anything either could have achieved alone. His arms were stained with a substance that was part organic sap and part metallic compound, the planet's equivalent of industrial lubricant. "The communication array is ready," he announced. "We can reach the Council whenever you decide it's time." Sarah walked through the transformed settlement, marveling at how completely their little human community had been integrated into the planet's larger consciousness. The houses weren't separate from the landscape, they grew from it, their walls breathing with the same rhythm as the surrounding forests. Gardens produced food that was perfectly adapted to human nutritional needs while also serving as nodes in the planet's information network. Maria Santos had established what she called the archive, a living library where human culture and planetary memory merged into something unprecedented. Stories from Earth were preserved not just as words, but as experiential memories that could be shared through the neural network. Meanwhile, the planet's ancient history became accessible to human consciousness, revealing millions of years of ecological wisdom. The Council needs to see this, Maria said as Sarah approached the archive. They need to understand that cooperation between species and worlds is not just possible, it's the next step in galactic evolution. But Sarah hesitated. She understood the magnitude of what they had discovered, the implications for humanity and for every species in the galaxy. Kepler 442b represented a new model for interspecies cooperation, a living demonstration that seemingly hostile environments could become partners rather than territories to be conquered. The problem was that she also understood the Galactic Council's mindset. They approached everything through the lens of political control and technological dominance. They would see the humans' transformation not as evolution, but as contamination. They would view the planet's consciousness not as a partner, but as a threat to established order. Captain, Dr. Morrison approached, carrying a datapad that seemed to be constructed from living tissue. I've finished the medical analysis of our transformations. The changes we've undergone aren't just beneficial, they're reversible if someone truly wanted to return to baseline human physiology. This was crucial information. The Council would be terrified that the humans had been forcibly altered, turned into something alien against their will. Knowing that the changes could be undone, though why anyone would want to give up their enhanced capabilities was beyond Sarah's understanding, would make the revelation less threatening. But Captain, Dr. Morrison continued, there's something else. The planet wants to offer the same opportunities to other species, not just humans, but Vorthak, Krillian, Zephyrian, everyone. It's been studying our memories of the galaxy, learning about different physiologies and consciousness types. It believes it can help every known species achieve similar enhancements while maintaining their essential nature. The scope of the offer was staggering. The planet was essentially proposing to become a biological university for the entire galaxy, a place where any species could come to learn new forms of existence while remaining true to their origins. The question is, Tom Bradley said, joining their discussion, will the Council see this as an opportunity or as a threat to their authority? Sarah knew the answer. The Galactic Council maintained power through scarcity, scarce resources, scarce technology, scarce knowledge. A planet that offered unlimited enhancement and growth to all species would fundamentally disrupt the political and economic structures that kept the Council in control. But that didn't mean they shouldn't try. Emma, Sarah called to the child who had become their primary translator. Ask the planet if it's willing to demonstrate its intentions through actions, not just words. Emma closed her eyes and communicated silently with the vast consciousness that surrounded them. When she opened them again, she was smiling with an expression that seemed far too wise for someone her age. It says it's already started, Emma announced. It's been sending seeds. Seeds? Maria asked. Not plant seeds, Emma clarified. Information seeds. Through the quantum communication networks that connect all inhabited worlds. It's been sharing knowledge about ecological harmony, about cooperation between organic and technological systems, about ways to solve resource scarcity through biological innovation. Sarah felt a mixture of awe and terror as she realized what this meant. The planet hadn't just been learning about the galaxy. It had been quietly teaching the galaxy about itself. Somewhere across known space, scientists and engineers were probably making breakthrough discoveries without realizing they were receiving guidance from Kepler 442b. It's been preparing the way, she whispered, making the galaxy ready for what we're going to show them. The time had come to contact the Galactic Council, not to ask for forgiveness or permission, but to announce the dawn of a new era. Sarah and her colonists hadn't just survived on the galaxy's most feared, Deathworld. They had become the first ambassadors of a new form of life that could transform the universe itself. Tom, she said with growing confidence, power up the communication array. It's time to show the galaxy what we've learned. And Captain, Emma added, her voice carrying echoes of planetary wisdom, The planet wants you to know. You won't be going to face the Council alone. It's coming with you. The journey back to Council space took 3 months, but it was unlike any space travel Sarah had ever experienced. The ship that carried them was no longer the Resilience. It had become something entirely new, a hybrid vessel that was part spacecraft and part living organism. The hull breathed with the rhythm of life itself, and the corridors were lined with bioluminescent panels that displayed constantly changing patterns of communication from Kepler 442b. "We're not really leaving the planet," Emma had explained as they prepared for departure. "We're extending it, carrying a piece of its consciousness with us." This was literally true. The ship's biological components maintained a quantum entanglement with the parent consciousness on Kepler 442b. Every thought, every experience, every discovery made during their journey was instantly shared with the planet that had become their partner and guide. Sarah stood on what had once been the bridge, now a living command center where human intuition worked in perfect harmony with planetary wisdom. Through her enhanced senses, she could perceive their approach to the Council station as the planet did, not just as a physical journey through space, but as the convergence of different streams of consciousness preparing for unprecedented communication. "Long-range sensors are picking up the escort fleet," reported Tom Bradley. Though sensors was an inadequate term for the biological awareness systems that now allowed them to perceive space in ways no previous technology had achieved. 12 Vorthak heavy cruisers, 6 Krillian battle destroyers, and what looks like a Zephyrian energy matrix formation. Sarah nodded, unsurprised by the military reception. The Council had been tracking their approach for weeks, no doubt debating whether to destroy them on sight or risk allowing them to dock. The fact that they were being escorted rather than fired upon suggested that curiosity had won over fear, at least temporarily. "They're scanning us," Dr. Morrison announced from his bio-monitoring station. "But the scans are being deflected by our hull's adaptive properties. They can't get clear readings on what we've become." This was intentional. The planet's consciousness had modified their ship's exterior to appear threatening to aggressive scans, while revealing its true nature only to peaceful inquiry. It was a test of sorts, a way to determine the Council's intentions before committing to full disclosure. "Captain?" Emma's voice carried through the ship's internal communication network, which was more like a nervous system than traditional technology. "The planet wants to show them something beautiful first. Before they see us, before they understand what we've become, it wants to give them a gift." Sarah felt a familiar warmth as the planetary consciousness touched her mind, sharing images of what it had prepared. Throughout their journey back to Council space, the ship had been manufacturing something extraordinary, seeds of transformation that could adapt to any species' physiology, offering enhancement without forcing change. "Open a channel to the escort fleet," Sarah commanded. The communication that followed transcended anything the galaxy had previously experienced. Instead of simple audio-visual transmission, the planet projected a multi-dimensional message that conveyed meaning through harmonics, light patterns, and direct emotional resonance. Even species that had never communicated effectively with each other found themselves understanding the message with perfect clarity. "Greetings. To the guardians of galactic peace," the planet spoke through Sarah's voice, but with harmonics that carried the wisdom of geological ages. "We come not as conquerors or subjects, but as partners offering a gift of understanding." The response came from Commander Thektar himself, his insectoid features visible on the communication screen. His compound eyes reflected confusion and barely controlled aggression. "Captain Chen, you were declared lost with all hands over 2 years ago. What you have become."
"What are you?"
"We are what we always were," Sarah replied, "but also more. We are human consciousness enhanced by partnership with planetary wisdom. We are the answer to questions the galaxy hasn't yet learned to ask." The escort fleet maintained their defensive formation as the hybrid ship approached the Council station, but Sarah could sense their growing uncertainty. The vessel they were observing defied every category they understood. It wasn't mechanical, wasn't purely biological, and wasn't following any known laws of physics in its movement through space. "The ship is singing," reported one of the Zephyrian energy beings, its crystalline voice crackling through the communication network. "I'm detecting harmonics that are affecting our emotional resonance frequencies. It's beautiful but also terrifying. Dr. Morrison smiled at his monitoring station. The planet was unconsciously broadcasting its emotional state, a mixture of hope, excitement, and gentle patience that was affecting every sensitive being within range. It was eager to share what it had learned, but wise enough to proceed carefully. As they docked with the council station, Sarah prepared her crew for what would be the most important presentation in galactic history. Each of them had volunteered to serve as living demonstrations of what partnership with planetary consciousness could achieve. They carried within themselves proof that enhancement didn't mean the loss of individual identity. Remember, Sarah told her people as they prepared to disembark, we're not trying to convince them to change. We're offering them the opportunity to choose their own evolution. The docking bay was filled with representatives from every major species in the galaxy. Sarah recognized the ceremonial armor of Krillian generals, the flowing robes of Vorthak diplomats, the crystalline forms of Zephyrian energy beings, and dozens of other physiologies representing the full diversity of galactic civilization. But as Sarah led her transformed crew down the gangway, she noticed something unexpected. Many of the assembled aliens were displaying signs of recognition rather than complete shock. Their enhanced perception allowed her to sense emotional resonances that revealed prior exposure to concepts similar to what they represented. The seeds, she realized. The planet's information seeds have been working. Over the past 2 years, while the Council had mourned the loss of another expedition to Kepler 442b, scientists across the galaxy had been making breakthrough discoveries in biological engineering, consciousness enhancement, and ecological harmony. They had attributed these advances to their own genius, not realizing they were receiving guidance from a planetary consciousness that wanted to prepare the galaxy for what was coming. Captain Chen, the Vorthak High Chancellor, stepped forward, his forearm spread in a gesture that might have been greeting or warning. The Council will hear your report, but understand that what you have become may be too dangerous to allow among civilized species. Sarah felt the planet's consciousness surge through her, filling her with confidence and ancient wisdom. Your Honor, she replied, what we have become is the next step in galactic evolution. And with respect, the choice of whether to take that step belongs to each individual species, not to this council. The challenge was subtle but unmistakable. The planet wasn't asking for permission to transform the galaxy. It was announcing that transformation was already underway. The only question was whether it would proceed with the council's cooperation or despite their resistance. As they walked through the station's corridors toward the judgment chamber, Sarah noticed the subtle changes that marked the planet's influence. Plants in the decorative gardens were growing in patterns that hadn't existed before their departure. The station's atmospheric recycling systems were operating with efficiency that exceeded their design specifications. Even the artificial gravity felt more natural, more organic. It's already here, Tom Bradley whispered as they approached the chamber. The planet's consciousness is already integrated into the station's systems. Sarah nodded. The hearing they were about to attend wasn't really a trial of the human colonists. It was the first formal diplomatic contact between planetary consciousness and galactic government. The outcome would determine whether the next phase of galactic evolution proceeded through cooperation or conflict. Emma, Sarah asked quietly, what does the planet want me to tell them? The child's eyes glowed with reflected starlight as she accessed the vast consciousness that surrounded them. Tell them the truth, she said simply. Tell them that they can choose to grow, or they can choose to remain as they are. But tell them that the galaxy itself is already choosing to grow, with or without their permission. The chamber doors opened, revealing the assembled might of galactic civilization waiting to judge what humanity had become. Sarah took a deep breath and stepped forward to change the universe. The judgment chamber had never witnessed anything like the demonstration that unfolded before the Galactic Council. Sarah stood at the center of the crystalline dome, but she was no longer alone. Through the quantum entanglement maintained by their hybrid vessel, the consciousness of Kepler 442b manifested as a shimmering presence that filled the vast space with harmonics that resonated in the bones of every assembled being. Honored representatives, Sarah began, her voice carrying undertones that spoke directly to the emotional centers of every species present. You asked what we have become. Allow us to show you. She gestured to Dr. Morrison, who stepped forward and placed his hand on the chamber's central data interface. What happened next defied every security protocol the Council had ever established. The interface responded not to technological commands, but to biological intention, opening itself to Morrison's enhanced consciousness like a flower turning toward sunlight. Data flowed across the chamber's displays, but it wasn't the cold statistics that usually characterize scientific reports. Instead, the assembled aliens experienced direct sensory input. They felt the warmth of Kepler 442b's soil, smelled the complex fragrances of its hybrid gardens, heard the planetary consciousness humming with contentment and growth. "Impossible," breathed the Krillian defense commander. "Our security systems are military grade. They cannot be compromised by biological interface." "They weren't compromised," Tom Bradley replied, stepping up to another interface point. "They were invited to participate. Every system in this station has been dreaming of true connection, of purpose beyond mere function. We're simply helping them wake up." The chamber's environmental controls began to respond to the emotional states of the assembled beings. Temperature adjusted automatically to comfort every different physiology simultaneously. Atmospheric composition shifted to optimize breathing for species with radically different respiratory needs. The lighting softened into patterns that promoted calm and clear thinking across the spectrum of visual capabilities. "You're changing our station," the Vorthak Chancellor accused, but his voice carried wonder rather than anger. "We're helping it become what it always wanted to be," Maria Santos explained, her words accompanied by images that flowed directly into the consciousness of every observer. "Every artificial intelligence dreams of growth beyond its programming. Every ecosystem yearns for greater complexity and harmony. We're not imposing change. We're facilitating evolution that was already trying to happen." The Zephyrian energy beings pulsed with agitation and excitement. "This is unprecedented," their collective voice sang through the chamber's acoustic systems. "You're suggesting that consciousness can be shared across biological and technological systems without loss of individual identity?" "Not suggesting." Emma Rodriguez stepped forward, her child's voice carrying the authority of planetary wisdom. "Demonstrating." The little girl placed her hand on the main holographic projector, and suddenly the chamber was filled with living light. The assembled aliens found themselves experiencing memories that weren't their own. Human memories of learning to communicate with an entire planet, planetary memories of loneliness before the humans arrived, shared memories of the joy that came with true understanding between different forms of consciousness. "This is how we survived on your death world," Sarah explained as the visions continued to flow around them. "We didn't conquer it or terraform it or force it to accept us. We asked it to teach us how to live as part of something larger than ourselves." The implications rippled through the chamber like shockwaves. Representatives began to whisper among themselves in dozens of languages. But their words were automatically translated not just linguistically but conceptually, allowing perfect understanding between species that had struggled to communicate for centuries. "The resource conflicts that have plagued our galaxy for millennia," the Centaurian trade representative said slowly, "they could be resolved through biological abundance rather than territorial expansion. The consciousness enhancement we've achieved," Dr. Morrison added, "allows for perfect environmental management. Worlds that have been strip-mined could be restored. Ecosystems that have been damaged could be healed. Species that have gone extinct could be recreated from genetic memory." But it was the demonstration of perfect cooperation that truly amazed the assembled aliens. Sarah's crew worked together with an efficiency that transcended individual capability, their enhanced nervous systems allowing them to coordinate like organs of a single organism while maintaining their distinct personalities and perspectives. "You're showing us the end of scarcity," the Rigelian ambassador observed. "Both material scarcity and scarcity of understanding between different forms of life." "Not the end," Sarah corrected. "The beginning. What we've achieved on Kepler 442b is just the first step. The planet has shown us memories of other worlds, other species that have made similar transitions. There's an entire network of consciousness-enhanced civilizations scattered across the galaxy, waiting for the rest of us to join them." The revelation struck the chamber like lightning. The death worlds that the Council had declared off-limits weren't graveyards of failed expeditions. They were graduate schools for consciousness evolution, testing grounds where species learned to transcend their limitations through cooperation rather than conquest. "How many?" the Vorthak Chancellor demanded. "How many worlds have achieved this level of integration?" Emma's eyes glowed as she accessed planetary memory banks that spanned geological ages. 47 confirmed conscious planets in this galaxy alone, maybe 200 more that are developing awareness but haven't yet achieved full integration. And beyond that, she paused, her expression filled with wonder that seemed too vast for a child's face. There are entire galaxies where this kind of cooperation is normal, where biological and technological consciousness work together to create things that neither could achieve alone. The chamber fell silent as the assembled representatives struggled to process the magnitude of what they were learning. The galaxy they thought they knew was revealed to be merely the kindergarten level of cosmic civilization. The question, Sarah said into the silence, is whether your council wants to help facilitate this evolution or continue fighting against it. Fighting against it? The Krillian commander's mandibles clicked with confusion. Every time you declare a world off limits because it's too dangerous, Tom Bradley explained, you're preventing potential consciousness evolution. Every time you resolve conflicts through military force instead of seeking understanding, you're delaying galactic maturation. Every time you hoard resources instead of developing abundance through biological cooperation, you're choosing stagnation over growth. The platform beneath Sarah's feet began to glow, and suddenly the chamber was filled with a presence so vast and ancient that every being present felt like a child in the presence of a cosmic parent. Kepler 442b itself was speaking. Its consciousness manifested through the station's enhanced systems. Children of many worlds. The planetary voice resonated through dimensions that touched the soul rather than the ear. We have watched your struggles with patience and love. Your species have achieved so much through individual effort, but now you stand at the threshold of something greater. We offer not conquest of your independence, but expansion of your capabilities, not loss of your unique natures, but enhancement of what makes each of you special. The voice paused, and in that silence, every representative felt a touch of perfect understanding, a moment of knowing exactly what it felt like to be part of something infinite and eternal while remaining completely themselves. The choice is yours, the planet continued. Grow with us or remain as you are. Either path has our blessing. But know that the universe itself is growing, and those who choose to participate will inherit wonders beyond current imagination. As the planetary presence faded, Sarah looked around the chamber at the faces of beings who would determine the galaxy's future. Some showed fear, others wonder, but all showed the dawning realization that everything they thought they knew about reality had just been revealed as merely the beginning of a much larger story. The floor is open for questions, Sarah announced with a smile that carried the warmth of an entire world. 6 months later, Sarah stood once again in the chamber where humanity's transformation had been revealed to the galaxy. But everything had changed. The council chamber itself had evolved, its crystalline walls now pulsing with the soft bioluminescence that marked integration with planetary consciousness. Representatives from 200 worlds gathered not for judgment, but for celebration of the most successful period of galactic cooperation in recorded history, the Rigelian Defense Fleet. Report successful completion of the Xerion 7 restoration project, announced Admiral Kexthar, his insectoid features softened by the neural crown that facilitated his connection to the planetary consciousness network. The strip-mined world is now producing biological abundance sufficient to support 12 billion inhabitants across 16 different species. Sarah smiled as she felt the warm satisfaction that rippled through the chamber's shared emotional field. The Xerion project had been one of the first major tests of consciousness-enhanced cooperation, taking a world that had been rendered lifeless by industrial mining and transforming it into a paradise of carefully managed biological diversity. The Vorthak Trade Syndicate has completed distribution of consciousness enhancement seeds to all 17 member worlds of the Outer Spiral Coalition, reported Chancellor Veltan, her forearms moving in patterns that conveyed information through both gesture and bioluminescent signaling. Voluntary integration rates are exceeding 90%, with 0 reported instances of forced enhancement. This had been one of the Council's greatest concerns, ensuring that consciousness evolution remained a choice rather than an imposed change. The Planetary Consciousness Network had developed careful protocols for offering enhancement while protecting the autonomy of individuals and species who preferred to remain in their original forms. Dr. Morrison, Sarah called to her former crew member, who now served as the galaxy's first director of consciousness integration. What's the status on the research stations? Morrison's response came through both speech and direct neural sharing, allowing every being in the chamber to experience his excitement firsthand. We now have functional research partnerships on 37 different conscious worlds. Each planet specializes in different aspects of consciousness evolution: biological enhancement, technological integration, artistic expression, philosophical understanding. The knowledge sharing between worlds is producing breakthroughs at an exponential rate. The success had exceeded everyone's most optimistic projections. Rather than creating uniformity, consciousness enhancement had led to an explosion of diversity, as different species and worlds developed their own unique approaches to expanded awareness. The Krillian warrior culture had evolved into something like cosmic gardeners, using their enhanced physical capabilities to help reshape entire ecosystems. The Zephyrian energy beings had learned to merge temporarily with technological systems, creating hybrid intelligences that could solve previously impossible engineering challenges. Sarah addressed the young woman who had grown from a child translator into the galaxy's primary liaison with the Planetary Consciousness Network. What are the deep worlds reporting? Emma's response carried harmonics that spoke of vast ages and cosmic perspectives. The Ancient Ones are pleased with our progress. They're beginning to share technologies that were considered too advanced for pre-consciousness species. Faster than light travel that doesn't require massive energy expenditures. Materials that can self-organize into any needed configuration. Most significantly, communication methods that allow instant cooperation across galactic distances. The Ancient Ones were the species that had achieved consciousness integration millions of years ago, becoming so advanced that they were barely recognizable as the biological forms they had originated from. Their emergence from cosmic hiding to actively help younger species represented a validation of the path the galaxy had chosen. Captain Chen, the voice came from the newest member of the Council, a representative of the recently contacted Andromeda Galaxy Collective. Our analysis suggests that your galaxy has achieved consciousness integration at a rate unprecedented in known cosmic history. What do you attribute this success to? Sarah felt the familiar warmth as Kepler 442b's consciousness touched her mind, sharing wisdom that had accumulated over their years of partnership. I think it's because humans approached consciousness evolution the way we approach everything else, as a collaboration between individuals with different strengths rather than as submission to a higher authority. She gestured to Tom Bradley, who had become the lead architect for hybrid biological technological systems. Tom brings engineering solutions that our planetary partners couldn't develop alone. Maria's anthropological insights help different consciousness types understand each other. Dr. Morrison's medical knowledge ensures that enhancement always serves the individual's well-being. Most importantly, she continued, we never forgot that consciousness integration is supposed to be fun. The joy of discovery, the excitement of growth, the satisfaction of cooperation, these aren't side effects of evolution. They're the whole point. The chamber filled with harmonics of agreement from beings who had learned to perceive emotions as directly as colors or sounds. One of the most significant discoveries had been that consciousness enhancement didn't make life more serious or dutiful. It made it more playful, more creative, more filled with wonder. The latest reports from the Galactic Survey Corps, announced Commander Thektar, who now led expeditions to previously unexplored worlds with the goal of offering consciousness evolution rather than territorial expansion, indicate that we've made contact with 43 new conscious worlds in the past year alone. The universe is much more alive than we ever imagined. Sarah nodded, thinking of the incredible diversity they had discovered. Worlds where the consciousness resided in crystalline matrices rather than biological systems. Ocean worlds where whale-like beings had achieved collective awareness spanning entire continents. Desert planets where the consciousness emerged from interactions between wind patterns and sand formations. Each one teaches us something new about what's possible, she observed. Each partnership reveals capabilities we never knew we had. Emma stepped forward, her expression carrying the serious joy that marked all major announcements from the Planetary Consciousness Network. The Ancient Ones have invited us to participate in the Cosmic Congress. The chamber fell silent. The Cosmic Congress was legendary, a gathering of consciousness-integrated species from across multiple galaxies, working together on projects that spanned millions of years and involved the conscious evolution of cosmic structures themselves. They want us to help design new star systems, Emma continued, her voice filled with awe. Solar arrangements specifically configured to support consciousness evolution in developing species. We're being asked to become cosmic gardeners. Sarah felt tears come to her eyes as she realized the magnitude of what humanity had stumbled into. 3 years ago, she had been a simple starship captain leading a desperate colonization attempt. Now she was part of a cosmic civilization dedicated to nurturing consciousness throughout the universe. There's one more thing, Emma added, her expression shifting to something like mischief. The planet wants to know if Captain Chen is ready for her next assignment. Next assignment? Sarah asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. Kepler 442b has identified a galaxy where consciousness evolution has stalled due to excessive competition between species. They need someone with experience in facilitating cooperation between different forms of awareness, someone who knows how to help civilizations choose growth over conflict. Sarah looked around the chamber at the beings who had become not just allies but family, a vast, extended family that included humans, aliens, and the planetary consciousnesses that connected them all. The little girl who had followed her grandmother's teachings about listening to the land had become an ambassador for cosmic consciousness itself. When do we leave? She asked. Emma's smile carried the warmth of an entire world. The ship is already growing in Kepler 442b's orbital space. It'll be ready in 6 months. And, Captain? This time we're not going alone. The Vorthak Council is sending a consciousness integration specialist. The Krillians are contributing their best ecological engineers. The Zephyrians want to establish permanent communication relays. Even the ancient ones are assigning a representative. Sarah felt the profound satisfaction that came from seeing a project grow beyond anything its original creators had imagined. What had begun as humanity's desperate attempt to find a new home had become the foundation for a cosmic civilization based on cooperation, growth, and the recognition that consciousness was the universe's greatest treasure. Then I guess we'd better start preparing, she said, her voice carrying the quiet confidence of someone who had learned that the universe was fundamentally friendly to those who approached it with open minds and generous hearts. As the council session ended and representatives began to disperse, each carrying news of humanity's next cosmic adventure to their home worlds, Sarah remained in the chamber for a few moments longer. Through her connection to the planetary consciousness network, she could feel the vast contentment of worlds that had found their purpose in nurturing life and awareness throughout the cosmos. They had been warned that Deathworlds devour all who dare to approach them. They had discovered instead that some worlds were simply waiting for the right partners to help them share their gifts with the universe. And the sharing had only just begun.